They weren't just a band. They were a dynasty, a family of global icons built on staggering talent and what seemed like an unbreakable bond. The Jacksons went from a tiny two-bedroom house in Gary, Indiana, to the absolute pinnacle of stardom, their music becoming the soundtrack for a generation. They were the first group in history to have their first four singles rocket to #1 on the Billboard charts. But behind the sequined jackets and sold-out stadiums, a civil war was brewing, one that would pit brother against brother and shatter their kingdom. This is the story of how Michael Jackson's fame became a force of nature, igniting a firestorm of jealousy and betrayal that not even the world's greatest entertainers could control. Before we get started, please like and subscribe for more stories like this. It all started with a dream, but it wasn't Michael's or even the boys'. It was their father's. Joe Jackson, a former boxer who never quite made it as a musician himself, saw a way out of the Indiana steel mills through his kids. He'd tried starting a band in the 50s, but it fizzled out. So he turned his laser focus to his sons, recognizing he was sitting on a gold mine of raw talent. This relentless ambition would be the rocket fuel for their rise, but it was also the slow-burning fuse of their implosion. It all clicked into place in 1964. After catching his son Tito playing his guitar, Joe formed the Jackson Brothers with his three eldest, Jackie, Tito, and Jermaine. A couple of years later, with Marlon and a pint-sized prodigy named Michael on board, they became the Jackson Five. Joe's rehearsal schedule was famously grueling. They weren't just his sons anymore. They were his project. He pushed them from local talent shows to a short-lived deal with Steeltown Records in 1967, and eventually to the legendary Apollo Theater in Harlem. Winning the Apollo's amateur night changed everything. It put them on the radar of Motown Records, and by March 1969, they were signed. Motown's founder, Berry Gordy, knew exactly what he had and moved the entire family to Los Angeles. The hype machine went into overdrive, with Diana Ross famously presenting the group to the world on their first album. And then came the explosion. Their first four singles, I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save, and I'll Be There, all stormed to #1 on the Billboard. Hot 100 group had ever done that before. The world was completely smitten with their sound, their moves, and the undeniable star power of their little brother, Michael. The dream, it seemed, was real. They were a unit, a family bound by blood, discipline, and a stunningly fast rise to the top. But even in those early days, the foundation was cracked. Joe Jackson's iron-fisted control forged a polished act, but it also bred fear and resentment that would fester for decades. Michael, especially, would later talk about the physical and emotional abuse, a trauma that fueled his own search for a lost childhood, and, ironically, the very controversies that would define his later life. Plus, the spotlight was never shared equally. Jermaine was the original lead singer, but it was Michael's electrifying talent that truly captivated the world. You could feel the dynamic shifting. The media smelled it too, asking Michael in interviews as early as the 70s when he was going solo. For the time being, they put on a united front, but the whispers were getting louder. The first real crack in the family facade came in 1976. The group wanted more creative control and a better contract, so they made the jump from Motown to Epic Records. But not everyone went. Jermaine, who was married to Berry Gordy's daughter, Hazel, made the tough call to stay loyal to Motown and left the group. He was replaced by the youngest brother, Randy, and since Motown owned their name, they had to rebrand as the Jacksons. This wasn't just a business move, it was a schism. Jermaine started his own solo career, finding some success, while his brothers tried to forge a new identity. The rivalry the press had been talking about for years was now very real, playing out on the record charts. But that was just a tremor. The earthquake was coming. In 1979, Michael released his solo album, Off the Wall, and it was a smash. But it was nothing compared to what came next. In 1982, he and Quincy Jones dropped Thriller. This wasn't just an album, it was a cultural cataclysm. Thriller rewrote the rulebook, becoming the best-selling album of all time, with estimated sales north of 70 million copies. It spent a record 37 weeks at #1 and swept the Grammys, winning an unheard-of 8 awards. The groundbreaking music videos, like the 14-minute epic for the title track, turned Michael Jackson from a pop star into the king of pop. He was the most famous person on earth. His success was on a scale his brothers, or any artist, really, could never dream of matching. And with that, the tension inside the family finally boiled over. The breaking point was the 1984 Victory Tour. It was supposed to be a triumphant reunion, the only tour to feature all 6 brothers. Behind the curtain, though, it was a war zone. Promoters only cared about Michael, the global phenomenon. Michael barely wanted to do the tour at all, only agreeing for his mother's sake. He refused to rehearse new group material, effectively turning the show into his own Thriller tour with his brothers as backup. The tour was a mess. Ticket prices were a PR nightmare, thanks to a complicated lottery system cooked up by Don King and Joe Jackson. Fights over money were constant. At one point, Michael demanded a publicist be fired and wouldn't go on stage until it happened. The brothers were reportedly taking separate cars to the venues and not even speaking. The stress got so bad that Michael ended up under a doctor's care. The Victory Tour was anything but. It was a public airing of a family cracking under the weight of one brother's unbelievable fame. At the final show, Michael announced it was the last time they'd ever performed together. The Civil War was now public. The Jackson 5 was dead. While the brothers were figuring out how to live in Michael's shadow, another Jackson was building her own empire. Janet, the youngest, had been mostly kept out of the family business. After a couple of unremarkable early albums, she took a huge step. She fired her father and took charge of her own career. In 1986, she released Out Control, a declaration of independence that made her a superstar. She followed it up with the socially conscious Rhythm Nation 1814 in 1989, which became a massive commercial success in the US and the best-selling album of 1990 in the States. Janet's success proved lightning could strike twice, but it also created another point of comparison and potential conflict in the fractured dynasty. If the Victory Tour was a fracture, the years that followed were an all-out war, fought in courtrooms and tabloid headlines. This wasn't about creative differences anymore. It was about money, control, and legacy. Michael was now his own global entity, operating completely separately from his family. His business moves, like buying the Beatles song catalog, were his alone, and that left some family members feeling shut out. But the internal squabbles were soon dwarfed by devastating public scandals. The child sexual abuse allegations against Michael in 1993 and again in the early 2000s were a seismic event that nearly destroyed everything. The family presented a united front, with Jermaine saying, "We support our brother wholeheartedly." But the strain was immense. The 2005 trial, which ended with Michael acquitted on all charges, left a permanent scar on his reputation and the family name. His death on June 25, 2009, didn't bring peace. It started a new, uglier chapter of the war. The battleground was now his estate, a massive empire left in the hands of 2 executors, not his family, according to a 2002 will. Crucially, Michael had cut his father and siblings out of his will entirely. His fortune went into a trust for his mother, Catherine, and his 3 children, Prince, Paris, and Biggie, born Prince Michael Jackson II. For siblings who had reportedly relied on Michael's financial support for years, this was a shock. What followed was over a decade of legal fights. Joe Jackson sued for a piece of the estate and lost. The executors, who turned the estate from being hundreds of millions in debt into a hugely profitable enterprise, have often clashed with family members over their decisions. The fights have gotten painfully public. Recently, Katherine Jackson has been in a legal battle with the estate over a proposed $600 million deal to sell half of Michael's music catalog. In a stunning turn, Michael's son Biggie filed court documents to stop his grandmother from using estate money to fund her appeal of that very deal, pitting grandson against grandmother. The war over Michael's legacy is just as fierce. The 2019 documentary Leaving Neverland, featuring detailed allegations from two men, caused a massive public backlash. The family was united in their condemnation, calling it a public lynching and pointing to his 2005 acquittal as proof of his innocence. "I know my brother," Jackie Jackson said. "He's not like that." But the film created a deep divide that mirrors the fractures within the family itself. The story of the Jacksons is an incredible mix of triumph and tragedy. So what do you think was the biggest reason for all the conflict? Was it the fame, the money, or problems that were there from the very beginning? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into music's most iconic families, make sure you subscribe. The Jackson family civil war is a story with no easy answers and no clear heroes or villains. It's a modern tragedy about a family who achieved the impossible dream, only to find that fame, money, and ambition were stronger than the bonds that held them together. Joe Jackson's drive created legends, but his methods left scars that never healed. Michael's otherworldly stardom shattered racial barriers and redefined pop culture, but it also created a chasm of resentment with his siblings that could never be closed. His death didn't heal the wounds. It tore them wide open for the whole world to see. Today, the battles rage on. The court fights, the public disagreements, the endless debate over Michael's legacy. It's all proof of a family still at war with itself. They built a kingdom of music, but they could never find peace within its walls. The most famous musical family in the world remains a house divided, a powerful and cautionary tale about the true cost of a dream. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories like this.